Hello and welcome to Conversations in Culture and Evolution. I am your host, Carles Salazar. I am talking to you from Lleida in Catalonia. Conversations in Culture and Evolution is a product of a work group of the Catalan Institute of Anthropology that goes by the name of Culture and Evolution. And in this work group, we are some anthropologists and archaeologists unhappy with the way in which our disciplines were treating Darwinian theory of evolution by natural selection and the relationship between biology and culture in the explanation of human behavior. And in order to compensate for this deficiency, or what we understand as a deficiency, we created this group. Today, our guest is a first-rate scholar and a first-rate scientist of the human condition. Today, our guest is Professor Michael Tomasello. Hello, Michael.
Hi.
Welcome to Conversations in Culture and Evolution.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, Michael Tomasello is James F. Bonk Distinguished Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at Duke University in North Carolina. Before, he was co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, and later also honorary professor at University of Leipzig and co-director of the Wolfgang Kohler Primate Research Center. He works on child language acquisition as a crucially important aspect of the inculturation process. He's a critic of Noam Chomsky's universal grammar, rejecting the idea of an innate universal grammar and instead proposing a functional theory of language in which children learn linguistic structures through intention reading and pattern finding in their discourse interactions with others. Professor Tomasello also studies broader cognitive skills in a comparative light at the Wolfgang Kohler Primate Research Center in Leipzig. With his research team, he created a set of experimental devices to test toddlers from 6 months to 24 months and apes' spatial, instrumental, and social cognition. The outcome of which is that social and even ultra-social cognition is what truly set humans apart. Now, just to give you an idea of how privileged we are today to have Professor Tomasello with us, I will mention just a few of the awards, of the multiple awards that he has received. In 2022, he received the David Rumelhart Prize of the Cognitive Science Society. In 2015, he received the Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award given by the American Psychological Association. In 2014, he received the Wiesbadener Helmut Plessner Prize. In 2011, the Klaus Jacobs Research Prize. In 2010, the Heineken Prize for Cognitive Science. In 2010, the Max Planck Research Human Evolution given by the Humboldt Society. In 2009, the Oswald Kulpe Prize, etc., etc., etc. So he has received numerous awards. Now, let me see if I can share now just to show you some of the books that Professor Tomasello has published. Here you can see the covers of some of these books. And by looking at those covers, you can have an idea of what the research topics that he has been dealing with. And I would say that the common denominator of all these books is something like foundations of anthropology. Professor Tomasello has done research on the most basic and the most foundational aspects of what is to be a human being, or what is the human species. Look just at the titles: The Evolution of Agency, Behavioral Organization from Lizards to Humans, Becoming Human, a theory of ontogeny, a natural history of human morality, a natural history of human thinking, why we cooperate, constructing a language, the origins of human communication, the cultural origins of human cognition, first verbs, a case study of early grammatical development. As you can see, very, very interesting books, very interesting titles, and I believe that they should be of interest. Let me see if I can. Should be of interest to all social scientists, but I'd say especially should be of interest to anthropologists and archaeologists. Now, Michael, let me ask you the question that I normally ask to all my guests. In what way has Darwinian theory been relevant to your research, and in what way do you think is relevant to study human beings, both from the biological and from the cultural point of view?
Well, my entry into all of this was as an undergraduate student when I was first introduced to the ethologists and to Darwinian theory. The thought that the way I'm thinking right now is a product of evolution, and that everything about human beings is a product of evolution is something that I'd never thought about until I was exposed to it as an undergraduate student, a university student. And I would say that if you look at many of the deepest philosophical questions, for example, posed by Kant and Hume, they want to know about causation and induction and the categories. Or if you look at human psychology today, open any textbook in cognitive psychology, they don't have an answer to the why question. They say, here's the way human cognition works, all right, here's the way, but why does it work that way? And they have no answer to that. And the answer to that is an evolutionary story. It's a historical explanation of there were some creatures like this, and they were exposed to these conditions, and they adapted in this way. And that's one of the uniting factors, I think. Your institute is trying to unite the sort of biological and the cultural. Well, evolutionary explanations are fundamentally historical explanations. And what I've gotten a lot of interest in my theoretical work from people that are more in the social sciences who normally don't like deterministic explanations and genetic explanations and stuff, because the theory of evolution is not fundamentally a reductionist or a determinist explanation at all. It's historical, contingent historical explanation, which should appeal to people in the social and human sciences. So for me, the combination of psychology and evolution, which of course touches on anthropology as well, of course, human evolution as well. I should mention that you mentioned the Helmut Plessner Prize in Germany. He represented a tradition called philosophical anthropology in Germany, and a lot of Germans were interested in some of my work because of that, what they call philosophical anthropology. In any case, it has been the framework within which I have worked since I started doing all of this, and I have a particular interest in ontogeny as well. But of course, ontogeny and the way ontogeny goes is a product of evolution as well, as we know from the Evo-Devo kind of approach. So yes, it's the organizing framework for everything I do.
Yes, well, everything you do, as I was saying at the beginning, has to do with this foundational aspect of what is to be human. I mean, if you had to define what is a specific, or what singularizes the human species, well, what makes us different from other species, if there is anything that makes us different?
Since I like historical explanations, I'll give you a little bit of an autobiographical historical explanation, which is in my book that you put on the screen, the cultural origins of human cognition, which you mentioned you read in your class. I think the answer was culture. right? And that the other creatures are doing all kinds of intelligent things, but humans are kind of pooling their cognitive resources together and accumulating this building, standing on the shoulders of giants and building on the products that other people produce. And so culture is what really sets us apart. And if you want to explain, why we're talking here over Zoom and chimpanzees are still in the forest, it's not due to an individual. It's due to this cultural process, cultural evolution. But then over the years, when we started doing, some people say chimpanzees have culture and whatnot. And so we started really digging down and doing our research where we compared young children to non-human primates, especially chimpanzees and other great apes. I think I've now come to say that the answer culture is still a good answer, but I would say now cooperation is a broader and deeper answer, with culture being one form of cooperation. It's group level cooperation of a certain type. And so when you look at young infants, not young infants, very young children, say 2-year-old or something like that, they haven't really started into the particularities of their social norms and all that of their culture, but they're already cooperative in ways that other great apes are not. They're communicating with pointing, they're collaborating with others toward joint goals. So I think evolutionarily, it was first new forms of collaboration and cooperation, and then culture built on top of that. And that's really the explanation that it's why the Victorian Englanders were so skeptical of Darwin's theory to start with, was that they were there with their telescopes and their British Parliament, and again these other primates were still in the jungle. How do you explain that? That's too big a gap. The gap is filled by cultural evolution, not by genetics and natural selection per se, but cultural evolution is of course produced by evolution as well. It's the form of social evolution. It's the form of social organization that has evolved in the human species, which has cultural transmission as part of it.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of cooperation, this is something that is normally said, well, humans cooperate in ways in which no other animals cooperate. I mean, in the case of non-human animals, you have kin selection, you have reciprocal altruism, but in the case of humans, we normally cooperate even with people who are not our relatives. And that seems to be specific of the human species. But I wonder why is that? Why do we have this form of cooperation? Because it seems that it's difficult. How did this evolve?
So that's what you need, an evolutionary historical explanation. And I have given my version of it in a couple of places, but I believe that the key, you mentioned earlier about that cooperation seems on the surface to be hard to evolve, right? We know Darwin worried tremendously about the social insects and whatnot. And the key concept is interdependence. So in interdependence, when we are doing something together, and I can't do it by myself, I need you and you need me, then helping you is helping us. And so that's the transition point. Now, I do think that in the modern world, humans do cooperate in some ways that are outside of those kind of directly interdependent situations. But I think that in human evolution, the way you get there, the two safe contexts for the evolution of cooperation, number one is kin selection, and therefore you get the eusocial insects. And the other one is interdependence, where mutualism, where we're both benefiting. And as everyone who's thought about these things very much understands, if you have a mutualism or interdependence, you still have to guard against some kind of free riding on the part of one of the participants. And so in human evolution, we had what I would possibly interdependent collaborative foraging, where we were, for example, foraging for big game, but also foraging for some other resources that require collaboration. But if you were a poor collaborator, nobody wanted you as a partner. So the partner choice is the social selection, which Darwin introduced sexual selection. Social selection is a generalization on sexual selection. It is your social group selecting against you. And in this case, it would be nobody chooses you as a partner. You're a partner choiced out of existence because you can't participate in this necessary collaboration. So I think there was a time in human evolution, I don't know exactly when, but certainly in the last million years, I would say, maybe half a million, where humans had to collaborate in order to get their daily food, or else perish, or else their kids didn't get enough food. And if you weren't a good collaborator, nobody would collaborate with you and you were excluded. So I think the interdependence is the key to preserving the logic of Darwinian selection, and at the same time noting the special situation of cooperation. I will say that I'm not a trained biologist. I get I had the normal university biology, but not past that. But I've read a good bit, and I've never really understood the term symbiosis is used between species. But you could easily say that the individuals within a human group are symbiotic within the individuals within the species. And symbiosis is a case where everybody benefits, and it evolves all the time in the natural world. So that's the explanation for me. And then culture comes at a slightly later point, and now culture, where you are cooperating with individuals whom you don't even know, in-group strangers, they're still in my group. And I know this because they talk like me, they dress like me, they eat the same foods as me, they have the same background as I do. And so these in-group strangers are still in-group. So I am built to collaborate with in-group strangers and to be a little suspicious of out-group members, which is, of course, one of the problems in the world today is dealing with that. But that's part of our biological heritage that for culture to evolve, you could sort of say that out-group members are free riders or cheaters on our group. We have built up this hunting ground. Maybe we have got, maybe whatever it is. Those outsiders, we have to exclude them from the cooperation to make it work. So interdependent collaboration with partner choice or exclusion of outsiders is the way it can evolve and still be consistent with Darwinian theory, I believe.
Could you say that we have an instinct for cooperation? Because I remember that some of the videos that you put on the internet, and you see all those little children when they are in front of an adult and the adult is having some problems. And the little children go there and they go and help immediately. Yes. as if showing that they don't have to learn that this is kind of innate tendencies.
Yes. And I would say one of the biggest surprises in my research career was that chimpanzees will do the same thing. And you say, wait a minute, I thought they weren't as cooperative. I make a distinction in cooperation between helping, where I'm helping someone for whatever reason, and collaboration, where we actually work together. So I do believe children, it comes naturally to children. They don't have to be taught it. Yes, the cultural and social context is going to be important later on, but the original helping is done at such a young age. We actually even have a study where if you reward it, it doesn't help it one way or the other. They just do it naturally. It's its own reward. And the fact that chimpanzees do it to some degree, again, I believe this is an interdependence explanation as well. Chimpanzees and other social animals are mildly interdependent. and humans are much more interdependent. But in any case, it does come naturally, and then the collaboration comes naturally as well. We have studies showing that young children, if they have the opportunity to gain rewards for themselves and another person individually, they pull on a rope and the rewards come to both of us. Or by collaboration, we both have to pull on the rope for us to get the rewards. The rewards are absolutely identical in both cases. The children prefer to collaborate, and the chimpanzees prefer alone because they're evolved to forage for food alone, and we are evolved to forage for food collaboratively. But then we have to share in the end. This is another constraint on the evolution of cooperation and collaboration in great apes is they are evolved not to share food. Dominant takes the food, and that's the end of it. But in human cultures, as we know, I'm thinking of Michael Gervin's review paper in Current Anthropology from around 2004. Across all human cultures, food sharing is just ubiquitous in all cultures at all levels, and it's a rare event in other non-human primates. So that's another constraint. But yes, I believe it comes. I tend not. The word instinct for me is a little bit of an old-fashioned word. I prefer, and I'm not in love with the word innate, maybe because I grew up an anti-Chomskyan. I use the word natural. The philosopher Vygotsky drew a distinction between what he called the natural line of development and the cultural line. And the natural line means you learn it on your own. Either it's more or less maturational, or you learn it on your own, versus the cultural line where you have to learn it from others and be taught. So I tend to use the word natural, which leaves open how much individual learning is involved. But it means if it's natural, it means you don't need any learning from the social group or the culture.
Right. And very closely linked with this issue of cooperation is another topic that you have done research on, which is the issue of morality, of the origins of morality. I understand by morality the sense of fairness, the sense that there's something unfair with other people, not with myself, because that wouldn't be, properly speaking, morality. I mean, just looking for my own interest. But if I see someone unjust to other people, that is this sense of fairness. It seems that humans do have that, again,
Yeah.
not naturally. Or
Yes. Yeah, good, thank you. Yes. So in my book on the natural history of human morality, I distinguish on page 1 between a morality of sympathy and helping, which already I would say, I mean, even though people talk about in evolution cooperation being, difficult and rare and all that, the fact is it's very common. It's a necessary part of being a mammal. Mammal mothers sacrifice for their offspring, right? And we've got oxytocin, and we have we know the mechanisms for this. All right. Now you say, well, that's kin selection. Okay. But the mechanism is built. The mechanism of parents sacrificing for their offspring is quite widespread. And some species have now generalized it beyond offspring and it has to be maybe interdependence or some kind of other certain conditions. But the actual mechanisms of sacrificing for others is a mammalian maternal characteristic, I would say. And so fairness, and so that's the morality of sympathy and compassion, and the other is the morality of fairness. And that's a little more rational. That's a little less emotional, right? It's more, I'm assessing what's the right thing to do among all the people sort of here. And I think that that's uniquely human, in my opinion. And Franz de Waal has this cute little video where he tries to show that capuchin monkeys have a sense of fairness, but not true. There are 5 failed replications in the literature. They're in my book. But humans are fair, and because I think it requires this sort of interdependent collaboration where we all know that everybody is tempted to cheat, right? So every time we collaborate interdependently, and I'm saying mutualism, it's in both our interests. Yeah, but it'd be better for me if you did all the work and I still got some of the rewards. So I may want to try to And a better deal may come later, and I may, renege on the cooperation, do something else. And so this idea of the normative idea that we need to stay committed to our collaboration until we reap the rewards, and then we divide the rewards equally because we contributed equally. I think that comes naturally to humans in a way that it doesn't to other primate species. One of my favorite studies we've ever done was one where we have again, we use this apparatus all the time where it takes two people to pull on a rope, two individuals to pull on a rope, and then the rewards come. If the rewards are separate, so that each individual pulls in their own plate of rewards, the chimpanzees are fine. But you put the reward in the middle, so they both pull in, but now there's one set of rewards. The chimpanzees fall apart because the dominant just takes it and the subordinate quits cooperating. And human children, they divide it up fairly. And we even worked it so that children pulled together. This is the study I was talking about. They pulled together and we rigged it so that all the rewards came to one child. And now that child actually gave up rewards to the other child because they had pulled together. And in a control condition where they didn't pull together, where they just walked in the room and this guy already had all the rewards on his side, they didn't share much at all. So the act of collaboration induced fair sharing. And we all know that it's part of our, again, I think it comes natural to us that we resent free riders. I mean, I was just talking, I have a teenage daughter, and just last night she was going on and on about she was in a collaborative science project with her classmates, and they were loafing, and she was doing all the work, and she didn't like that, okay? And that comes natural to us, that I don't want to be the one doing all the work, and you get just as many rewards as I do. It's not fair. Fairness is about this sort of equity. And there can be, of course, something other than equal. It can be that if I did most of the work, I get most of the reward, and you might agree to that because you don't want to put in as much effort as me. So there are other, but the notion of fairness always has some notion of equality, either equality between the two of us straightforwardly, or equality of reward proportional to equality of effort, or proportional to equality of need. Aristotle already talked about the basis of fairness being equality in one form or another, whether it's merit or need or just straightforward equality. So the answer to your question is the morality of fairness is all tied up with this interdependent collaboration, and the whole normative, our whole normative way of talking about ought, you ought to do this and you ought to do that, is in the context of our togetherness, that in our togetherness, you're not doing the right thing. You're hurting the rest of us somehow. And so the whole notion of normative ought, of what you ought to do, it makes no sense with the unless you have some kind of an interdependent group. The philosopher David Hume has a quote that I use in my book about, if every individual human was completely independent and could get everything they wanted by themselves and could have their own babies and raise their own babies, males, everybody's independent, there wouldn't be any morality, right? The morality is how to negotiate this social thing, given that we have our selfish motives as well.
And do you think that this sense of fairness that seems to be so characteristic of humans, did that evolve by group selection, or what could be the?
Yeah, I have tended to be careful with group selection. I'm friends with David Sloan Wilson, and he thinks I'm too timid with the group selection. But for sure, I think you can get it through natural without group selection. That it's just part of becoming a member of a cultural group. That to stay a member of the cultural group, I have to be accepted by everyone. To be accepted by everyone, I have to act fairly. So I think that's the logic of it. It's the group is it's driven by the cultural group. But and maybe even cultural group selection in the Boyd and Richardson sense of cultural group selection. All right, but group selection, genetic group selection, I don't think you need it, but not sure about that.
Right, right. Now, let me ask you now about something that you also have done research on, which is the origins of language. And well, you have been critical of Chomsky's theory of innate grammar. But sure, there has to be something innate in our capacity to learn language.
Absolutely. No question about it. I actually have a recent paper that's still in press where I actually come back to that issue, which I hadn't looked at in a few years. Chomsky's proposal is more specific than just than it's usually given credit for in the larger academic community. What he says is innate is generative grammar, universal, a particular theory of grammar with the categories and all that. And on the surface of it, that's absurd because there's 6,000 different languages in the world and they operate very differently, especially some of the languages, some of the ergative languages in the Pacific Ocean, and other languages are organized very differently. And if you take something that in Western European languages is fairly common, something like the notion of sentence subject, which we learn in grammar school, the subject of a sentence, there are languages that don't have a subject of a sentence. They have agents who perform actions, but they don't have a subject of a sentence. So there is huge variability. So how can he say it's innate when there's this huge amount of cultural variability? And it's because he has this deep notion of this underlying universal grammar that's common to all languages. My alternative proposal is there's a deep psychology that is common to all humans. And this would be certain ways, certain forms of cognition that is common to everyone. Certain forms of social cognition, taking perspectives is very important for language acquisition. Being able to form conventions. You and I agree to do something a certain way. Language is conventional, after all. And engaging in discourse where we are back and forth. So for me, there is an innate or natural basis to language. Of course there is. Children all around the world start learning language at around the same age. But it's because of the maturation of a host of skills and abilities at around the same time. A sort of Chomskyan linguist wrote a paper at one point about why does language acquisition start at the age that it does, which is around a year old, more or less. And the answer is it's around the same age that they start engaging in this kind of shared intentionality and joint attention and pointing, which is not linguistic at all. Right? They all come in together because they're understanding their social world in a different way. They're understanding themselves as cooperative partners of people that need to communicate. And so I don't want to get into the technicalities of generative grammar. I will just say that you don't need generative grammar is not accepted by, I would say, the majority of linguists in the world. It's kind of at this point a minority view. And if you don't accept generative grammar, then you can have innate bases of language that are much broader and much more psychologically based and not specifically linguistic.
Right.
And specifically grammatical, I should probably say.
Yeah. Well, but he was saying that we have this grammar and we have a kind of domain-specific model for language, I suppose. That's what the point that he was saying.
Whatever else language is, it's not domain specific. It draws on all my cognition of the world. It draws on my social cognition of your perspective and how I need to communicate to you. It draws on my emotions, my intonation. I'm getting excited now because you brought up something that it's my whole psychological being is in there. And what he's saying is, just the structural part, just the grammatical part is the innate module. But if you don't buy his theory of grammar, you don't have to believe that.
Right. Another theory that you have been critical is the so-called modular theory of the mind, which is very closely linked with this, because the theory according to which our mind is not just this domain general device, but it is made up of very different devices, different models, relatively independent of each other. and with different functions. So what's wrong with this view?
I think that there is some of that, right? So the evolutionary psychologists, sometimes written with a capital E, capital P, evolutionary psychologists from the Tubi and Cosmides sort of brand. I saw that you had Stephen Mithen on here. He's sort of from that camp as well. And I don't doubt that there are a number of those, and they've studied, for example, mate selection and cooperative exchange stuff. So there could be some of those, but the way the organism works is, and this is some of my recent work on agency. I've been talking about this, is that an organism has multiple values. I'm calling them values. So I need to get food. I need to avoid predators. I need to mate. All right. And these are sort of values I have that are always kind of present. I always need to be vigilant about an opportunity to mate or to get food and not be eaten by predators. And let's say a situation arises where there's some juicy food over here, but there's a predator nearby. I've got two modules at work now. I've got my foraging module and my avoiding predators module, but I have to make a decision, So I think the agency is that the individual has to decide what to do now, and they can only decide on one thing. And so they have to balance all their competing interests and whatnot. And yes, we may have some sort of domain specific things going on, but there is also domain general psychology involved. For example, I have goals and intentions. I have plans. I have perception and attention. I have memory. I have all these things are general. And there are some of the people that sort of radical modularity, massive modularity, who want to say those don't even exist. And I just can't imagine that being the case. But just take something like one of the things that some of the evolutionary psychologists have talked about, because it's so interesting in the modern world, is our affinity for sugar. And they give the explanation that in the past, when sugar was rare, it was a good carbohydrate to get. Fruit and whatnot, we were evolved for that. Now in the modern world, it's not adaptive anymore because there's too much sugar and people get obese, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, we have a natural, and you can call it a modular attraction to sugar, whatever you want, but I go on a diet. I mean, or I choose something else. So like many emotions, we have pulls in certain directions. Mother Nature wants us to pull us in certain direction. Mother Nature wants us to eat sugar whenever we find it. But then other things occur and we want to do something else. So I think that there are a lot of, I would call them biases. If you want to use the word innate biases. Gigerenzer talks about heuristics, biases. Some of the theories of emotion are about that. They're about action tendencies and action, promotion of certain actions by certain emotions. And fear, is an emotion that readies you for fleeing and so forth. So I'm perfectly happy with all kinds of biologically evolved tendencies, and maybe in some cases reflexes. I have an eye blink when something comes at my eye. So we can have modular reflexes, we can have innate tendencies and all of that. But this idea that the mind is divided into these modules that don't communicate with one another, I think goes against the whole logic of the way the agent makes decisions and operates in the world and chooses between competing motivations and interests.
Yeah, what about also this popular idea that you have mentioned with this lack of sugar, that our brain has been is adapted to the environment of evolutionary adaptedness, and that makes it maladaptive to the environment in which most of humans live now.
I believe that's probably the major contribution of evolutionary psychology, is pointing that out. I believe that's it. And the sugar is one example, as we talked about, but I mentioned before this in-group, out-group psychology. When we were hunter-gatherers, it was adaptive to be suspicious of people that look different from me and spoke a different language from me. I ought to be suspicious of them. I don't know what they're up to. My people that speak my language and are from my group, I can sort of trust them, generally speaking. And these other guys, it's not that I hate them. It's not that I, completely don't trust them or whatever, but I need to be a little careful because I don't know about them. So I think that's another case in more in my domain where we still have with us an adaptation that was adaptive in a previous environment and that may not be adaptive in the modern world.
Right. Let me see. It seems that we have a question of someone. Now, Mr. Tomasello, congrats for all your work. In your opinion, could we locate the origins of our capacity of storytelling before the origin of a spoken language? It seems that storytellers were important.
Storytellers are important for sure. I'm not sure what this person is getting at saying before language, because it seems like
language.
Well, it seems like it needs language. There certainly could be. I think in my book on the origins of human communication, I talk about the first sort of thing that we'd want to call a conventional language could be gestural. So I can imagine a situation where I just had a traumatic incident with a predator, and I come back to the camp and I gesture and gesticulate and stuff. And so I can imagine telling some kind of narrative without a full-blown conventional language. And yes, the storytellers are important in the sort of first instance, in the ground level of relating things to others in the group that only I witnessed and I know they didn't witness. And then, of course, it evolves into much more narratives and personal narratives and origin stories for the group and all kinds of other things that are very important for cementing culture and for keeping cultures together, for us to have common ground. One of the, I use the term common ground a lot, and I have with my friend, I have a lot of common ground about basketball and all kinds of other things that we share in personal common ground. But in cultural common ground, we have a lot of things that we share with even strangers. We were talking before about in-group strangers. I have a lot of things that I share. If I'm in Catalonia and I run across an American, there are a lot of things I know I share with that American that I don't share with the Catalonians because we grew up together in America, etc. So that's cultural common ground, and a lot of the glue to human cultures is that that people that grew up in your same culture with your same language and everything and your same child rearing practices and the same environment, that they share a lot with you, and we call that cultural common ground. And storytelling is one of the major ways of developing cultural common ground, like origin stories for our culture and so forth, are critically important to that. And you notice, I mean, in today's ugly politics pretty much all over the world, but my country in particular, one of the things they want to do is tell different origin stories. We have a fight right now in our country because when I was growing up, the narrative was this triumphalist, America is a special country and all that sort of thing. And then there evolved in more recent times, well, America was a racist country. It started with slavery and all that. And now Donald Trump and his people want to say, no, we're going back to the traditional story of make America great again. And we don't want to wallow in all these other things. And they even denied that the slavery, was a big deal and stuff. So there's a fight over the stories we tell about who we are and how we got here that is absolutely central to culture. And so I think it's part of the evolution of culture is the evolution of storytelling.
Right. Now, let me ask you now about theory of mind and our mind reading capacities, because you consider that our mind reading capacities is fundamental for the emergence of culture. But right from the beginning, there has been always this controversy whether chimpanzees have theory of mind or humans. It seems that the chimpanzees have a kind of theory of mind, but it's not exactly like the ones of humans.
Yes,
So
I think that's exactly the answer. They have a kind of theory of mind, but not like the human ones. And I'm sorry to be picky about language, but I actually also don't use the term theory of mind, just like I don't use
right,
it, because it's too broad and people mean different things by it. In the narrow sense, theory of mind. When you say somebody did a study with children on theory of mind, what it generally means is understanding beliefs. And the philosophers made beliefs really important because if um, to understand someone else's mind, I have to understand that they're not acting on the real world. They're acting on what they believe to be the real world. So if you believe that the toy is in the box, you're going to look there, even if it's somewhere else. So they've really privileged this notion of belief. And I do not believe that chimpanzees understand beliefs. They do understand people's goals and intentions, and they understand that when people see things, if a competitor sees some food, he's going to go for it. If he sees it and he wants it. So the classic philosophical belief desire psychology, he believes that the food is there and he wants the food, then he'll go there. So that logic chimpanzees work with. They work with if he has a goal for something and he knows how to get the goal, he's going to do that thing. But it's on the level of action and goals and perception, not on the level of things like beliefs, which are, I believe, socially. I believe beliefs come out of social interaction, where you think one thing and I think another thing, and we don't know who's right. And then we have to resolve it by coming up with the idea that there is this objective situation that is independent of what you think and what I think. And it sort of is the normative judge over who's right. Is this and this distinction between subjective perspectives and the objective world is the part that I think chimps don't get, and I think they don't get it because they don't interact in shared agencies, in shared intentionality, in interdependent collaboration like that. They don't need it. Each of them is in their own little bit. So, and one of the things that we have both theorized and have some data on is that when chimpanzees are reading other minds, as it were, mentalizing or whatever you want to call it, they're doing it in competition. They're trying to outsmart the other one. What does he see? What does he want? Where is he going to go? And humans are doing it, maybe some in competition as well, but in cooperation. And in cooperation, what's different is in cooperation, I want you to read my mind. If we're interdependent, all right, I want you to know what I'm thinking, what I'm planning, so you can coordinate with it. When you look in game theory at coordination problems are solved by communication. I tell you what I'm going to do, and since it's a mutualistic situation, it's important for me that you know what I do so you can coordinate with it in the best way so that we are successful. And so people have asked me, couldn't theory of mind have evolved in competitive situations where you're trying to outsmart the other guy? And the answer is maybe, but much more likely in cooperative situations where I want you. I'm trying to facilitate, I'm communicating, I'm telling you what I'm thinking. And so I think cooperation is a much more likely evolutionary context for the humans' unique mind reading skills, including the understanding of beliefs. Also, giving reasons. A lot of philosophers are very big on that we justify things. You say you think the toy is in the cup, and I say the toy is in the refrigerator. And you say, huh? And I say, I saw somebody put it there. So I'm giving you evidence. I'm giving you justification for my belief. And of course, understanding the distinction between individual perspectives and the objective world, and then arguing with people about it and giving reasons for your beliefs is really a very general description of what we do in science. That's what we do all day, every day in our science, is we argue with our colleagues and we provide evidence and justification for our beliefs. And, science was this unique cultural institution that evolved based on the idea that the best evidence is empirical observation-based evidence, and that's what really took off. But it's essentially knowing that no one's perception of the situation is definitive, It's everyone has a different perception, and we have to somehow adjudicate and come to an agreement about what we think is the objective situation independently. And so chimps are not in that game at all.
The chimps would have what they call the Machiavellian intelligence, isn't
Yes,
it? I
yes,
mean,
yes, yes. That was one of the first characterizations, and I think it's still apt. Yes.
so that they can understand other minds to compete, but not to cooperate.
Well, here, okay, all right. I forgot this. I wrote this somewhere like 20 years ago, and I forgot it. And it's one of those things that I thought was so cute. uh, they're not really Machiavellian, because if you read Machiavelli says you should be ruthlessly selfish and read other minds to outsmart them, but don't let them know you're doing it. Okay, right? So you're concerned about how they're viewing you, and that you're putting up an image to them that's not what you're really doing. So I think that's a step beyond what they're doing. So it's a little more prosaic, is just that they're sort of they're sort of rational actors in the economic sense of doing things to maximize their own benefits and not worrying so much about others. Machiavellian in that more limited sense.
Right. And linked to this, another concept that you have been using sometimes is the concept of shared intentionality, that we not only think of ourselves as an I, but as a we. That would be also specific to humans, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes. I think the term shared intentionality I've been using for some time, and I often don't use it because it sounds too technical. But everything I've been talking about, the psychological basis of it can be described as shared intentionality, interdependent collaboration, sharing attention to things, common ground knowledge. All of these things are shared. Shared psychology, a shared intentionality in the Bretonno sense of intentionality. So lately, I've been also like using the term shared agency, because if you look at the behavioral side, the collaboration is shared agency. We are doing something together for shared goals and so forth. And shared intentionality is kind of like the psychological capacities. We mentally coordinate with one another. We take one another's perspective and all of that. So it's all part of the same thing. So the term shared intentionality and the concept is something I borrowed from the philosophers of action, Michael Bratman, Margaret Gilbert, John Searle. I think it is exactly the right description of the psychology underlying interdependent collaboration and culture.
That would be specific for humans. I mean, no
Absolutely,
chimpanzee.
yes, absolutely specifically human. And again, we have all kinds of studies where we put chimpanzees or other great apes in situations, including bonobos, by the way, which some people like to say are more cooperative. They're more friendly, they're more generous with the food, but in terms of collaboration, they're the same. And we put children and we put great apes in situations where they can reap extra benefits by collaborating, by coordinating their minds to collaborate, and they're just not very good at it. And human children, when they're doing that, they're communicating, they're telling the other one what they're thinking, they're pointing out things that would help the other person play their role in the collaboration. And the chimpanzees are doing none of that. They're each in their own little world. We talk about, I characterize chimpanzee collaboration as social tool. Okay, they know they need the other person. If we put them in a collaborative situation where they have to pull in the rope, they both have to pull in on a rope together. They know they need the other person. They're smart. They understand that. But if they get their reward first, then they're done. They don't care if the other guy gets his reward. All right, and if they can take the whole reward, they will. So they're using the partner as a social tool, whereas we have a shared sense of we are doing it together, and therefore we should share the spoils together.
Right. Now, let me ask you now about learning. Another distinction that you have drawn is the distinction of social learning and cultural learning. But I think it's related to the idea that one thing is learning from others and learning through others. Tell us the difference between.
That was a distinction I made in 1993, and it has been through a lot of controversy back and forth. But the basic idea is learning through someone is taking their perspective. So it requires a certain social cognition underneath it, that here's what he's trying to do. And so if I want to do the same thing, I should try the same strategy that he's using. So it's a more cognitive version. So we have parrots, right, that mimic, and I use the word mimic. They copy the surface behavior. So, but they're not learning through you. They're not using it for the same way you are. They're not understanding what you're doing they don't understand you as an intentional agent. And so they're not trying to copy what you're trying to do. We have children who will imitate not what a person actually did. If a person has an accident, they're trying to take the top off of this and they drop it. They don't drop it. They try to take the top off because they know that's what he was trying to do, even though he didn't actually do it. And they don't copy accidents that people have. They only copy intentional behavior. So learning through means taking their perspective as an intentional agent and doing what they were attempting to do or trying to do. The other form of cultural learning, there are two other forms, but one other is what we call instructed learning. And this is teaching, but from the perspective of the learner. So pedagogical learning, or that in that case, I see that you are trying to teach me something, and I have to take your perspective on how you're taking my perspective to teach me. And collaborative learning is where, let's say, school-age children, or us every day in our science, where we discourse with other people and we end up understanding things in a way that we wouldn't have if we were on our own. And that person didn't exactly teach us and we didn't exactly imitate them, but we clashed with their perspective and that made us think about things in a new way. So cultural learning in the form of imitative learning, taking perspective, and pedagogical learning, where I have to kind of, again, take your perspective on my perspective, and collaborative learning are all forms where I say children, it's not just the kind of social learning that occurs widely in the animal kingdom, but it's a special form of social learning that takes advantage of these kind of special social cognitive skills of shared intentionality and theory of mind.
That is also related to the distinction, I'd say, between imitation and emulation, that humans can imitate and chimpanzees don't. They emulate but don't imitate, isn't it?
Yeah. So this was also this one has undergone a lot of controversy, but in the radical form, there are now several forms of emulation that people have posited. But in the radical form, let's say we're observing chimpanzees in the wild, and we see the mother push over a log, and there's some insects under the log. And so she pushes over the log and gets some insects. And now her offspring comes over and pushes over the log and gets some insects. And we say, oh, the child is imitating the mother. Well, in a general everyday sense of the word imitation, okay. But what did the child actually learn? They didn't copy the mother's action. The mother might have pushed it over with her hand, but the child isn't strong enough, so they pushed it over with their leg. They're not copying the mother. They saw that there are insects under the log. And if the log had rolled over on its own, if the wind blew the log over, they would have learned exactly the same thing. So I want to say there are forms of learning in a social context that are not really deeply social. They're about learning the outcomes of people's actions. Now, if the mother had not pushed over the log, the child wouldn't have learned that there are insects under the log. So it's social in the sense that the source of the information they got was produced by a social actor, but the child's not trying to copy the strategies or the behavior of the mother. They're just learning about the environment. And if you look at chimpanzees next to their mothers in tool using situations like nut cracking and termite fishing, they're not copying the mother. They're seeing, which holes have insects in them and which don't. They're seeing which sticks are good and which sticks are not good, but they're not copying mom's intentional actions.
Right. And what about over-imitation? Because sometimes they say that humans over-imitate. They imitate too much.
So imitation has this other dimension that was first noticed by first talked about by the developmental psychologist Aina Uzgiris, that we imitate in order to do things better. We see an expert doing something and we copy them. That's a clear form of instrumental imitation, and it can be cultural learning where I'm learning through or whatever. But we also imitate to be like people, right? So in different cultures, we grow up and we dress like people in our culture. And if I'm a teenager and I want to be a member of a certain group, what do? The first thing I start to do is I dress like them, I talk like them. So conformity and imitation in the sense of conformity is a way of developing social relationships. If you're trying to make friends with somebody and they say they like a movie, you say, "Oh, me too," and maybe you don't even like it, but you're trying to show that you're like them, and so this is called the social function of imitation, and there's social psychology experiments all over the place on the internet. People get married on the internet, and you ask them why, and they say. And they've never even met this person, and they say, "Oh, because we like the same music and we like the same movies, whatever." So this social function of imitation, I think, is part of human cultural grouping, and probably came only with the emergence of culture. That people who talk like me and who look like me, I try to copy everybody so that I fit into the group. And over imitation is, I think, a case where the social imitation kind of takes over. What they do is they show people an action that has an outcome. So it's an instrumental action, but they do it a funny way. So they press a button by going this first. And children will do this before they press the button. And of course, chimpanzees don't. They don't do the unnecessary thing to press the button. And I think the most widely accepted explanation now is the child is saying, the adult is showing me this is how you do it. This is how in our group, this is how we do it. This is how it's done. And so they want to conform to the way everybody does it. And so they do it the way that it's done in the group. So over imitation, I think, is rituals are part of the right. You want to form solidarity in the Catholic Church. You follow certain rituals that everybody follows the same way, and it makes you feel more cohesive. So so over imitation is about social solidarity and identity, I think.
Well, I suppose it's also cultural learning, because when you learn a culture, you learn an awful lot of things that you don't know why
Yes.
they are useful.
Yes. No, absolutely, absolutely, and that's part of the sort of normative dimension of culture, that you learn that this is the way things are done, and you trust that, it's been worked out already. People, experts, people already know, and so I'll just do what everybody else does and I trust that this is the best way to do it. That's it. Yeah, exactly so. But I also dress a certain way to show my identity, right? I go to follow Real Madrid, God forbid, or and I wear my jersey, right? Because I want to show my identity with that fan group, whatever.
Right.
Sorry, Barca. Sorry.
Barca, yeah. Right. Now, let me ask you the final question about something that you have already mentioned, which is the issue of agency. In your book about agency, you tell a story which goes a good way back. I mean, it's not only humans that are agents. I mean, lizards are agents already. So take us through all these different stages of the evolution of
So
agency.
what I was trying to do is,
first, what is agency?
okay,
Now, what is an agent?
So agency is the individual making decisions. Right. And so there are people who are genetic determinists, like Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene, that it's all in the genes and everything's determined, and the innate modules and all that. And there are people who are neuroscience determinists. It's all in the neurons and the brain, and it's all determined. But the fact is that in evolution, natural selection cannot prepare the individual organism for every situation they might encounter. That's not possible. I have a certain situation in front of me now. I want to, let's say I'm a squirrel and I'm going to cache this nut somewhere. Is it better here or is it better there? Natural selection can't prepare for this particular environment and this particular decision. So what evolves is a psychology, if you will, of decision making. Agency means that I have the choice. And what I followed through in that book is that there's different types of agency that, and I'm only following the line to humans. I'm not going over to insects and octopuses, and they're another story. Birds, I'm going to stay away from them. On the line to humans, we have the sort of earliest vertebrates. The model species, the contemporary model species is a lizard. No, we didn't evolve from lizards, but we and lizards have a common ancestor. And so, and they are what I call goal-directed agents, where they just choose whether to do something or not. They engage in either-or decision making. I'm sorry, wrong. They engage in go, no-go decision making. Should I do this or not? From the earliest vertebrates came early mammals. Now they are more either-or decision making, the kind of way we think about this or that. Should I do this or should I do that? Mammals are the first ones with emotions that really, now where natural selection is trying to tip the balance, that you should be especially motivated for this kind of food. You should be especially motivated for sexual interaction and so forth. And they kind of have an executive function where they can inhibit behaviors if they need to. And that's part of this either or decision. I could do this or I could do that. I choose this, I inhibit that. And finally, great apes are what I call rational agents or metacognitive agents, because they can reflect on what they're doing and decide if this is a good decision. And so they actually think about and compare different decision trees. And then humans also, on top of all of that, they are all of those things, but on top of that, they could form shared agencies, and that's just the interdependent collaboration that we've been talking about, and the underlying psychology of that is the shared agency or shared intentionality, whereas all the other was about individual agency and individual decision making. So the sort of most fundamental sort of philosophical argument is against determinism and in favor of natural selection. Actually builds or selects for individual agency. If you want to anthropomorphize natural selection is delegating the decision making to an individual, and so she builds an apparatus of decision making in individuals. So it's compatible with with the idea that natural selection is kind of blind variation and selection after the fact, but what results from that is individual agents.
Good. Now,
in cases, I should say, sorry, in cases of unpredictability, the ecological circumstances that pull for that is uncertainty in the environment or unpredictability. If you have like a single cell organism swimming around in food, you don't need to be an agent, right? You just open your mouth and get food. But if you're a more complex organism and you've got predators and you've got prey and they're all unpredictable, now you have to be able to make a decision in the moment. What do I do in this moment when there's a predator here and a prey here, etc.? And I believe that individuals actually make those decisions, and that natural selection has evolved an apparatus for doing that.
No. So now the very, very last question, because after talking about agency, we have talking about agency in animals, agency in humans. What do you think about the possibility of agency in computers, artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I will say this though: the machines that are the computational models, the robots and the programs that are most impressive are definitely not agents. I mean, ChatGPT, I was as absolutely surprised as everybody else. I use it all the time, but whatever it is, it's not an agent, right? It's responding to what I ask it. It doesn't have its own goals. It's not making its own, if all of a sudden life on planet Earth were wiped out, it would sit in it would do nothing. Right? It would just sit there. So it's not whatever. It's intelligent. It's all kinds of things, but it's not an agent. Now, when you have robots and self-driving cars and drones and things, they're not as intelligent as ChatGPT, but they're more agent-like. But of course they're agent-like because we built them to be agents. We looked at how do agents do things, and part of the book is to try to analyze agency in terms of like control systems, say a drone. What do they have to do? They have to be able to perceive the world. They have to have a goal state they want the world to be in. They have to perceive the world and see if it's in that goal state, and if it's not, figure out something to do to change the world to match the goal state. That's the kind of logic of the way a control system works. And so when they build robots and self-driving cars that do that, that perceive the world and react to it appropriately based on their goals, now you've got a model of agency. But I have to say that I myself tend to be skeptical of those kinds of claims and whatnot. And I guess my kind of simplistic way of saying it is we can have a computational model of the weather that predicts the weather with exquisite accuracy, but that computational model doesn't rain. It's a model. It's our model. So the computational models are models of this stuff, but there was an old saying by one of the old general systems theorists of don't mistake the map for the territory. Right? The territory is the real thing. The map is our depiction of it, our schema for it. But you know, the map is not the territory. The map is a map of the territory. And I sort of feel like these are models, and they can be models that help us understand how things work. We can, if you build a model that can do it, well, that's telling you something. But I wouldn't say that they are agents, and I'm not worried about them taking over. No.
Right. Michael, we have to leave it here. That's all we had time for. Thank you very much. It has been an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
The privilege is mine. Thank you very much.
And thanks Montse Martes for her technical assistance, and thank you all for watching.
Okay.